So we won't be having documents on the screen?
I don't, we didn't think it
So I
would be
use the big
necessary
screen. Okay,
today for discussion.
fine.
Yeah, I'd rather people see the faces of people talking, so that's the main. We're live, but I'm just looking to confirm that. All right, we are.
Okay, just see. All right. Good morning. Let us begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We are all treated equal. It is April 17th, 2026. This is budget meeting number 2 for this year, and I call this meeting to order. Before we start, I'd like to thank council for making a hard decision on Tuesday morning regarding the RDAC committee continuing. And I have to say, I'm very proud of you, proud of all of us, and that we did it unanimously, and that we will continue to work to have a more inclusive community, and that town council as well. So thank you all very much. I didn't want to pass this opportunity. It came later in the meeting and people may have missed it. So I wanted people to know that we made that decision unanimously and united, and we look forward to the work continuing. So with that, I will take approval of the agenda for today. So moved. Thank you, Councillor Carver. Second. Thank you, Councillor McCarron. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. We will go in. This is
2026 annual budget will begin. It's an open meeting, so we will be looking first. I will hand it over to the CAO to brief note we want to make, and then we will continue on.
Yeah, hopefully the audio is working properly now. I had noticed a little hiccup there, but I think that was all coming through.
Okay.
As far as I know. So yeah, this is the second budget meeting, and having done quite a number of these at this point, I just wanted to comment on our usual sequence. So if anyone didn't watch the first meeting was the presentation of the budget. So that's where we did put up the package with the extensive capital operating budget documents. The public can access on the website, and we walked through those at that meeting with council members, address some questions. So they've now had a week to stew over those documents and think about any other questions, suggestions, comments about the operating capital budgets. So that's the main purpose this morning. We usually go through operating first, get feedback from council members. We will be at that level producing another draft of the budget after this. So we don't do the first 2 meetings, but we will be after today. So you'll have a new draft version for next Friday's meeting, reflective of any changes today. Typically changes that are corrections, staff just make. Changes that are actually substantive, line reductions, item removals, changes between maybe a capital project in 1 year and next. Council does do those by motion, the motion being to direct staff to amend the draft operating or capital budget. So that way council is able to determine the majority will on various changes to the budget. And that's been a good practice, I think, in prior years. So we will be trying to capture some of those motions this morning if we are already. And then usually we go through 2, if necessary, more hours and go into closed session. And the closed session on the second budget session is for certain aspects of the budget that need to be discussed in closed session. So if there's councilors who have questions this morning having to do with contracts and things, I might say we'll need to hold that closed session. Personnel similar, those changes might need to hold certain details in closed session. And there is an expectation that the closed session covers those aspects, which is why it was put out with personnel and contract negotiations as the primary. So that's just the standard way that we usually structure the meeting. And with that, I think we'll be listening and making notes on everything council has to say.
Great. So we will. After reviewing this for a week, you don't have to speak, but we will take turns if you have something that you wanted to add to the budget or question or don't quite understand. Maybe we'll start with the deputy mayor.
I'll kick things off. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say, so we have a table balanced budget. But my observation is that the balanced budget requires a draw from sources that would have traditionally been allocated for capital purposes. So this was a trend we begrudgingly started last year. And as well, we've talked many times over the last few years with the province's observation that our reserves could be higher. So when I look at this budget and I look at kind of what our budget assumptions were for the reserve balances at the end of 2020, March 31st, 2026, knowing how favorable some of our variances were on those capital related revenues, specifically like D-transfer tax, I wonder, like, when will we have some line of sight to figuring out did those surpluses were they spent in fiscal year 2026, 25, 26, or will they augment the budget estimates around the reserves? And I think that's kind of question number one. So are the reserve assumptions on slide 5, are they the best information we have now, or are they still subject to a whole bunch of year-end closing adjustments as we finalize those financial statements?
I can speak to that a little bit. Sure. Specific, I guess, to 25, 26 year end, we're first going to the, and I don't have the page versions in front of me, but I can help with this. The page of the operating budgets that will correspond to fiscal services. So there are a number of fiscal services in there. And looking in the column for actuals for 25, 26. And if anyone finds it first, you let us know what page it's on.
Is it the one that's called page 5 in our current document?
No, it's further along, and I think
Further along. Do you have a page number?
I should be able to find it in PDF. Okay, so it should be page 41 on my PDF. So it should be page 41 of the PDF. Yeah. So 40, we'll look at 44. What we'll start at page 42 on the printout.
That's the transfer.
So in the column on unaudited 25, 26, this is the transfer to own funds agencies. So what came out of the funds that were intended to go into the capital reserve? Looking at the budget. So in the budget column, unaudited column, there's only one difference. So obviously, stormwater management, town equipment, wastewater, operating recreation reserve. We made those transfers. We show those transfers we made
As per the budget.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The different one would be capital reserve. So the increase there is about 150,000. So that increase to the budget, but 150,000 for the capital reserve plan. That is the point, Joe, to increase the transfer revenue.
Okay.
Slightly less than. So you can
Yeah,
see that a small portion was
Required.
Yeah. But the vast majority of the transfer extra did get into the capital reserve. So that is reflected in the balance. As far as going forward, I think it's just the next page. It says from, so the budget line. As a from reserve, so this is, to your point, in the prior year, the operating reserve transfer that is necessary to bring the budget was $230,000. That is what was transferred from reserve. In the current year, we're looking at 150. So that's an improvement, pretty substantial $150,000, but it's still $150,000 drawn on the operating reserve. The fact that the operating reserve is being drawn down, if you look back to page 42, corresponds in the budget column to a proposed transfer to the reserve of $100,000. So that's down from 175 in the prior year. So basically, this year, better than last year, but to balance the budget, we're taking 150,000 from operating reserve, 100,000 of which is projected is coming from the funds that would normally fund capital. Whereas last year, 175, 230 for reserve. In both cases, though, the reserve is net producing about $50,000 a year. So we have a trend year over year of both taking some monies that would be normally we would prefer to put into capital. Right. The overages that actually make kind of made up. But also the operating reserve is falling $50,000.
Right. So that, which leads me into my second point. So I thank you, Gil. I think that was, well, at least for me, it was there. So right. So what's like the point? So we have this expectation that the transfer tax is going to generate revenue, and we're going to allocate. And traditionally, not really by policy, but more by practice, we've decided we're going to take that transfer tax and fire it into capital-related investments. For the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do that to the way we had for the previous 20. And I guess what I'm worried about now is that not only are we now, at the same time, those revenues are needed to support our debt levels and the higher levels of principal and interest payments that we make from those pools. We're also allocating that same pool to fund operating expenses. And that worries me because it gives you comfort that everything's fine on the operating side, which would mean that don't worry, everything's going to be fine on the tax rate. And so we're pushing a wave of deferrals in the interest of maintaining the tax rate. But as you can see, even when we maintain the tax rate, we still need to rob from Peter to pay for the obligations under operating expenses, which are supposed to be paid for by the tax rate revenues. So this isn't a hill to die on per se, but I think we need to be very aware of this multi-year trend because now it's up to 175,000. Last year it was going down.
Yeah.
But relative to the overall trend, so we got lucky last year is the point. We got lucky because we had a budget of 175 and we brought in close to 400. Good news. Very popular place. Lots of people come out. Transfer tax, but what happens if they don't come? And what happens if there is no 175 for transfer tax for whatever reason? So I worry about us being anchored to these rates that no longer cover the costs we have, and we keep adding operating expenses. Some of them are thrust on us. We dealt with one the other day for cybersecurity. Like that one little benign cybersecurity, $20,000. Well, that's a cent. And so I just wonder if the budget is anyway, I think you got the point. I'm a little worried with the use of capital related resources to fund operating expenses, which was never our intent. What do you all think about that?
It would be interesting. It would be interesting to go back to the operating budget and say, okay, we want an operating budget without any money coming out of the gas, out of the transfer tax. Whether it's a clean operating budget funded solely by tax, right?
Which is what we did last year, is at least a kick at the can, really. Like that. Just to say, okay, we weren't comfortable with the original estimate. I think we brought it down through the budget process, maybe $50,000. Something. It wasn't the whole. Like I think there's a realization that we're not going to peel 150 grand out of the operating budget unless we're going to start making cuts that we probably won't have agreement around the table because we're all very reasonable people and there are things that we think are important. But I do wonder if we're getting a little used to drawing down on that piggy bank. And anyway, I mean, so I guess that was the first point there. I'll just pass it on to Councilor Carver to move on to the next item.
Oh, are we doing it around the table?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy.
Yeah, following on that, and I agree, it's a little scary to keep drawing, taking that. And now, anyway, how much would we have to raise taxes to cover? I'm not saying we should raise taxes, but what difference would,
Well, we saw how 20,000 was 1 cent.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So the point is that we have a tax rate, but it's 5 cents short of our operating budget.
you'd say
So
it-
we're
about 5 cents.
recovering the extra 5 cents because of the popularity of the community and people doing real estate transactions. So, which is like fine, it's all cash, it spends the same, but
But it's not,
not-
it's not as. Yeah.
it's very,
That's a good way to
Disagree with this.
kind of get through all the different twos and fro's that I was mentioning, is ultimately we're plugging a shortfall
Yes, yeah.
with revenue that is variable.
Yeah, so 5 cents would be the difference.
And then it,
Well,
do you want
yeah,
to, what do
It's
you want to?
150,000,
Exactly.
I would say, is actually the shortfall this budget.
Yeah.
We're dealing with 150 with
Yeah.
combinations.
Yeah, or
50
7 or 8
from
cents.
fee transfer, but
Yeah, same with.
it is 150.
so, I mean, no one's talking about raising the tax rate by 8 cents. Like, I'm certainly not talking about that either. I'm just suggesting that we, as
A
a,
day is coming.
well, we as a council should figure out what we're gonna do about this problem, because our tax rate our current tax rate is insufficient to cover our operating budget, according to the budget. And I think just as long as we're all cognizant of that, then that's cool. So there won't be anybody putting their hand up 2 years from now when we have to raise taxes by 15% and say, oops, I didn't know. I just think we just need to,
Well, I think it's important to stress that, like, the operating assumption that we've been working under, I think successfully for a couple of years, but is that, the town will see more growth due to new construction that will in time
Yeah.
be sufficient
Yeah,
to
fair enough.
compensate. But the speed of our capital program is dueling with that, you know what I mean? So we're going to debentures this year, which will then start to need to be paid out of these capital funding streams. If by the time that those debentures are kicking in, new construction is taking place, especially if the infrastructure is to support new construction that is bringing additional tax base, that has worked and has prevented tax increases in the town for quite some time now. It's been the, operating assumption. But what if? That's the challenge. We're running on thinner margins with that assumption.
Council room.
I might have missed something, but what is the municipal best practice, like where we should be for reserves? What's the,
well,
So, yeah, do you want to build it?
well, I mean, this is just one opinion, Kevin, but thank goodness the province had moved away from their historical practice where they really focused on operating and capital.
Yeah.
And the province, in a more enlightened way, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, said it's all cash. Like, so they don't force us to really allocate our capital to operating reserves versus capital reserves. They all view it as reserves. And when we get the FIR, kind of that's the way it's kind of organized. It doesn't show the difference between capital reserves and operating reserves. So, I mean, the new Ashley, 6 months from now, maybe coming to council with the recommendations for the CEO to say the breakout of all the various reserves can cause us pain, can cause us grief. And maybe we need to revisit how we have our reserves structured and if they're logically organized going forward.
And there's two big things about coming this year that will really substantially affect that. It gives us the ability to really set, financial policy in that regard. One is we're finally catching up with the audit. So Joe's question earlier, I didn't really answer the honestness part. There are some parts of the year end that normally we would do in terms of reserves, transferring funds to and from, that haven't happened now in a number of years that we need to reconcile with the help of our auditors this year. And they know that, and they're prepared to support that process. But essentially, when we close a year, we normally take any surpluses in operating that are attributable to fire or general and put those in the operating reserve for general or the fire code reserve for fire. And we have not done those year-end reconciliations. So, presumably the operating fund balance, if there is any, is effectively an operating reserve, like we've been operating without transferring into reserve. And that operating fund balance, Ashley and I have been hesitant to approve anything to over the years, because it really, at the end of the day, the auditors can figure out where the chips have fallen And so they may come back with a reconciliation later this year that presents a slightly different
To
picture. I would
reorganize it.
think a better one with respect to the funds for operating, but that's a complicated reconciliation with all the capital funds in and out. And we're definitely dependent on getting the audits caught up. So, you know, with the 24-25 really finished, with the 25-26 then actually being completed within 6 months of the end of the fiscal, or potentially, hopefully. So we'll be in a position to have a really accurate reflection of cash, which can then be reconciled with reserves. Simultaneous to that, the new finance and audit committees are starting up and have a mandate for council to consider draft reserves policy as the first course of business. So simultaneously, we'll have better audited numbers and a policy providing direction. And next year's budget, one would think, would have reserve targets as an objective in the pre-budget, which then the new Ashley, and myself, will have to present the budget that says, what's the long-term plan to set the reserve balances to where the policy stated balances should be? Which, to the traditional answer to your question, would have been 3 to 6 months of operating revenue. So council will set those
Which
targets.
is crazy, right? I mean, the province's aspirational target is far in excess of what any of our 49 municipal units would aspire. So for us, how much cash that would mean, we just have to like be sitting in the bank not being utilized.
How much?
It would be, and we'd need another couple $1 million to meet that target. So we know rational organization would strand taxpayer cash and just to appease the province on that box and on the FIR.
And it is a cash management.
Yeah.
We do have an operating line of credit of 1.3 million, so that, you know, is there for those cash flows.
That's why we have bank draws and numbers and things like that.
And I guess that question, so with our current reserves, what is the bandwidth that we would be able to run? We needed to.
The operating reserve
for a couple months
budget is down to $5,000, so we'll not do anything. But if we presume the operating fund balance is higher than that, we probably have cash on hand for like a month. I mean, we have much more cash. Cash is more often.
Sure.
Yeah. So right now, we're probably usually, you know, a couple of months from operating cash being, but then we're down into the line of credit. So that would give us another couple of months. And the time of year when that tends to kick in is the near the end of the fiscal year. There are times near the end of the
These are
fiscal
cash
year
flow.
when we
These
could
are
have cash flow negative.
these are cash flow issues
They are.
versus total liability issues. So,
Okay.
but I mean, I don't know. 5,000. The operating reserve looks low.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's important to stress that mid-year, when we do have an audited reconciliation reserves, that number is probably more than $5,000. But we have, you know, by our own tracking, not put money in intentionally to bring it up.
Yeah.
You know,
We're not gonna budget on
surpluses that
assumption.
didn't get put into the reserve, they're just enough.
But is that one possible outcome of the reserves policy? And that there would be X amount of dollars put into the operating reserve every year?
I think rather than having it be, you know, a surplus accrues to the reserve, it would be necessary, presumably, if we're setting a target, to try to proactively put money into the reserve to get to that target. And I think SAB represents a multi-year scenario to achieve that.
I mean,
And that's the trick.
Yes.
It's very difficult to get a policy that would bind the hands of a future council around how they are
Oh,
going to
for sure.
allocate.
It would just be how
I mean,
staff prepares the draft.
it's a
and then
notional
council does what
idea,
they have
right?
to do as a- Yeah, you can't make the council put aside money, but we can present budgets that try to.
No, because, I mean, there's a solution to it. We just start slicing projects. I mean, the idea here is if we want to create an operating surplus that's bigger than the one that's projected today, then we've got 42 pages of places to look for savings.
The town has it.
And everybody has-
The hard choices, by the recreation department. That's sort of the equivalent type of cost that we're talking about, is a direct loss of programming, but it saves money. You know, you can't beat around the margins on that structural difference.
Okay, Councillor Carver, do you have any?
No, I'm just gonna
And we can come back to people, like something, Councillor Boone, you were asking some questions, do you have any?
I just wrote a list of things that I'm just interested to
Sure.
understand more on.
Yes,
And for the reserves, that's my first one. So that got brought up, which was great. I'm interested to understand the cash flow and how the fire department actually runs and how revenue comes in, how it kind of goes out. I know that's kind of a bigger, but I'm just trying to understand, is that a profitable entity within itself, or is that a manageable entity, or are they drawing on what the town does? I don't know the answer to that. Actually, do you know?
I think for the fire department, it's managed quite well and they're expensive. I think the fire chief that's in-house now stays pretty close to what the budget is. So he's always asking for an update on where his budget is and making sure that he doesn't go over it. We zero out the budget. It's shown separate within the budget, but it's still part of the town. Of the fire department.
Yeah.
So we net it out as a zero balance budget to bring it back into the town net zero. So in a sense, any of the revenue and the expenses balance out each year. So it's not necessarily that I don't know if historically they come in well over budget. I know that there was a couple big projects that they didn't do last year that were around 30,000 expenses, so they would have been under budget last year. But I think they net out pretty well based on donations and manage their costs quite sufficiently.
Yeah, I mean, the department's operating is funded on the rates, so the donations aren't into the great capital purchases. And to some extent, they do. So ultimately, money in from rates from the town residents and outside area residents, all of the operating expenditures of the fire department has any surplus net of that would go into the fire equipment reserve. And the same thing at the end of the year, if it turns out that there's an unexpected surplus, it should go into the fire equipment reserve. We also have a transfer to the fire equipment reserve built into that number. So a portion of the rates also is going to capital, so into the fire equipment reserve. And then any donations over and above that go into the fire equipment reserve. So the fire equipment reserve is intended to be the capital funding arm, but it is all accommodated within the rates and donations within the fire department. So it had taken some time to get to that point, but at this point, the fire budget is totally self-sustaining. So,
Well, yeah, not only that, but it provides a large subsidy to water utility as well through the hydrants.
yeah.
Right. So, right. So if you think like our 22 cents or 21 cents for fire, 21 cents for fire is really two things, right? It's like 11 cents for the fire, which kind of mirrors what all of the other regional areas pay, but then it's the other 10 cents for hydrants.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pay through the fire rate, this $180,000 that you see on page 46. And then that money just gets transferred over to the water utility for providing the service.
Yeah.
So this comes down to a question around, we always talk about fire service. Holy smokes, 22 cents is a lot of money. It's really not 22 cents. It's really like 11 cents plus the hydrants. And so we're just simply charging through this vehicle and routing the cash over to the water utility. So like that is we've talked about this for years about, it's regulated, we have to charge it. This is the way the town works. But, you just think about what the water utilities financials would look like if in the absence of that transfer. So it would be dire, obviously. It'd be pretty dire.
And there were times when streetlights were the equivalent for electrical. Now the streetlights represent a trivial 1% of the overall electrical budget. But at times in the past, when there was less home electricity use, the streetlights played a really big role, and they were less energy efficient than they are now. They represented a pretty substantial subsidy from like the general coffers of the town to the utility before you deal with individual home costs. But now that's no longer a factor. It's substantially, what is it, a third of the overall water budget, operating budget for water is coming from that.
Yeah, exactly.
I just need to. I think last week when we went through it, I think we went through a lot. So I was trying to kind of understand, but I think just trying to understand how that revenue, I guess that's the main thing for so many things that we do, right? If it's a project that you have independent, like the solar garden or like the fire department, you know, what's the revenue coming in versus what's the cost associated, and where do those fit, you know, and where does the town have to put in extra money or however, or where does that, if they earn money, where does that money kind of, you know, get positioned and stuff. So I just want to be able to understand those two things, and I know that this conversation will evolve as we get going today, but
Well, I'll highlight that the water utility is the one area in this
And the water
budget where the utility is not self-sufficient, is dependent on the town.
Yeah.
It's running these fire deficits, whereas
Yeah.
fire and electrical are not in that position.
and it's not necessarily that bad. I was something showed up on my social media feed the other day talking about the privatization of hydro in Nova Scotia back in 1992, and how it became privatized. And when we look at it today, you know, it used to be a government-owned facility, and government would take care of something that wasn't necessarily, you know, it kind of wasn't necessarily a big moneymaker. But today we've lost a bit of our autonomy over those rates, over the rates, you know, and stuff like that. Anyway, I don't want to go into that conversation, but I think that sometimes the town has to take on those projects that, you know, it would be better if we took it on rather than somebody private taking it on. So anyway, the other question that I have, and getting clarity on some of the provincial government budget cuts and other aspects, like if there's things that are going to significantly impact. It wasn't clear to me last week when we kind of went through that conversation. And then the other thing that I would look at, I'm not necessarily a finance guy, but I'm more of a revenue guy, is, you know, have we done any kind of a list, or kind of at least trying to just get an idea of, are there new revenue sources this year that we can start to think about how we can tap into? And as we do it, right, like, you know, there's opportunities that come up. And can we at least just get an idea of what some of those could be? And then, you know, I don't know how we discuss them, but I just mean that, you know, sometimes it's, oh, okay, here's one that could be fairly easy. You know, that could bring an extra $100,000 in or whatever it is. But I think just at least having an idea where, number one, the risks of costs, but then versus the opportunities for new revenue streams and beyond tax. So anyway, those are just general ideas. And I'm much more interested in hearing all of you around here, because many of you have dealt involved in these numbers for a lot longer than I have. And I'll leave it at that.
They thought the new guy was bringing all the ideas.
I just wanted to comment on the provincial budget impacts, because that's a question. It's a good one for the public watching as well. So the provincial budget impacting us, I guess, is two ways. It's not directly hitting our operating budget really at all, but indirectly it is. It's directly hitting our capital program, because a lot of the programs we've relied on for capital, especially sort of capital, they're taking smaller scale stuff that people run out of pocket rather than borrowing for beautification initiatives and that type of thing. A lot of the provincial funding for that stuff has been reduced or eliminated. The provincial funding that was intended to proactively support municipalities doing engineering work, prepare for larger scale capital projects that still would be funded. The proactive engineering support type funding program, which is the Provincial Capital Assistance Program, has been eliminated. So municipalities that want to be shovel ready will likely be going more out on a limb with Nova Source funds to get there than previous. So those little changes will affect our capital programming. But then also indirectly, the operating budget is impacted by costs to other organizations that seek funding from secondary funding sources. Seeing that sort of grants applications. So there's that effect as well. And that this might be the first, or I guess at this point, second year of cuts, so there might be more things to be cut next year that will even more directly impact us, because I think that that's about what's left.
Mhm.
And the new revenues conversation seems like an awesome discussion for the finance committee when it's up and running.
Sorry, and one last question. Just, and because I have heard of the audits have been delayed. What are the reasons why the audit's been delayed?
Oh, boy.
I'm just curious, and I don't wanna, and I know that might be outside this.
No,
but-
it's okay. Well, this has been a long-standing issue that's gone back a decade, perhaps.
Okay.
And it's before my time, but I think essentially it's just getting the work done between us and the auditors, and
The key issue is we've transitioned auditors, so Ashley's job has been, we left one audit firm and moved to another. And we're, I think, on pretty much these.
We-
with new auditors.
the new auditors have worked out quite well with us. But I think whatever the reason was, even before I came on, the main issue that came out of the audits being late was that the FIRs weren't filed, and the FIRs, which is the financial information return that's filed to the province, and that's not filed, they withhold funds. They withhold it, we are getting it, they just hold it to kind of be like, get your stuff in so we can give you the money. So that's kind of been the main issue as a result of it. I think the audits being late is just a combination of lots of people in the kitchen and just all kinds of things that happened before me. But I think, once we switched auditors and we put in a lot of sweat equity, we've gotten there. And I think that it's more just, we're on track now, and I can pretty much see that nobody on my team or middle team would want to be off track again.
I was just at the, as I said, Maritime Municipal Electric Utilities Conference over in Berwick this week, and I'll say our fellow municipalities, Berwick and Agnish, are in a similar situation. I think the number of municipalities that are late on their financial information return for 24-25 is not a lot. We're not a good company.
And somewhere in that whole process, the province changed its rules. So it generated a whole lot more work for the auditors to incorporate that rule change. Is that correct?
There's a lot of work to conform to what the FIR needs as an output, and we're now working with auditors that are working with the province to get what the province needs. So in the long term, we'll cut down on the time, but the FIR is a pretty specific document, and it's not that it's difficult, it's just the way that our financials were in the past weren't very easily transferable to the FIR, and it's a very rigid template. By format, exactly. So our
It's led to, auditors have different interpretations of how the province's requirements jive with generally accepted accounting principles that apply to both utilities, which are different, and our general accounts. So you really get down into a situation where there actually are changes every year that need to be accommodated between the auditors and the province, but when you're doing it for several years all at once, it creates a little bit of an extra challenge.
Yeah, so I think we've gotten past that. I think that we now have auditors that are conforming a lot to what the province wants. That makes the province happy. It speeds along the review process a lot more. So we should be smooth sailing going forward. But I can't speak to exactly what happened before me, but it did put us behind substantially. And I think it's just a combination of a series of unfortunate events.
And we're on track now for, is it the last 2 years?
So 24-25 audit is almost there, and the FIR is almost there, and then we'll be starting in a month or so the next audit for 2025.
Okay, so it's just a 1 year.
Yeah, so the end of September is our FIR filing deadline, which is a very harsh deadline once the audit's complete. Our March 31st year deadline, and then to have the audit completed, and then have the filing of the FIR in September. But we're at least now on track of getting it close to that filing deadline. A lot of municipalities don't make that deadline just because there's only a certain amount of auditors we're allowed to use, and the province deems reputable to produce the financials for municipalities. So we're all kind of fighting for these like under 10.
Scarce resources.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's a lot of complex issues, but
And technically, we'll be in good standing on our reporting when the province accepts the FIR for 24-25.
yeah,
We'll fall out of good standing on our reporting if they haven't accepted the FIR for 25-26 by September 30th. Though in practice, for the last several years, they've relaxed that deadline.
yeah, because I think they're starting to
Because no one
acknowledge.
thinks.
Yeah, so I'm leaving
It-
just
it
as
is
soon as we
what
could.
You mean, have you accomplished everything you said?
Yeah, that's true, but I'd like to reap the benefits.
But I think that the point should be made though, that although there are delays in the formal audit of financial statements, like they're all based on working papers and financial governance that happens within the town. So it's not, people shouldn't be confused that in the absence of having the audited financial statements, we don't know where every nickel and every dime is and exactly the town's financial position. That is not at all the case.
Yeah, two very different things. The work is done, it's just whether the audits.
Remember, the audits in the rear, looking in the rear view mirror, and all of the financials that we're leveraging here are, are looking forward.
Yeah, even when we're caught up, we're still a year behind the budget and even a further year behind the projections of where the budget will leave us. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great point.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go on. Councillor Wilson, do you have anything to
I don't have anything specific to the budget. There are two things I hope we have a chance to talk about at some point. One is kind of the deployment and the focus of our human resources, and I assume we'll talk about that in a professional. And the other, which I think I mentioned in a note the other day, is I think in policy and strategy it would be useful for us all to talk a little bit about changing the way we treat the stormwater and the infrastructure charges and changing from a fixed amount to a cents per 100 amount. Leave them in the same category as contributions to the capital funds, but have it set up as a variable, so don't vary with the assessment. But I think that's something for policy and strategy at some point if everyone's willing.
Provided it's good.
Both of them is willing. But it's going to end up in policy and strategy. Otherwise, I just say I think I know we're 5 cents behind in kind of the money we should be allocating, but I think generally speaking, the budget is very well focused on what we've spoken of as our priorities as a council. So I'm pretty sure.
I think you can quite open with that concern for the infrastructure.
The equitable,
Yeah.
whether it is an equitable charge.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. And Councillor Copeland, do you have anything you were?
Yeah, just a few bits and pieces. Well, the first bit isn't a bit. I'm looking at the actual increase that will be on the taxes as a result of the valuation changes. So it's no charge, no increase on taxes, but it will be an effective increase because of the increased property values. It seems to me that from what I'm reading looks like 3.79%.
That's the blended capped assessment increase.
So how does that blend work?
It's a function of the lost cap that have been lost by people who've moved,
No, I understand that.
coupled with everyone who continues to be the same as last year, just getting the CPI
Oh,
increase.
okay, so if you took out the new valuations, if you will, those who've been here for a while,
At 2.1.
2.1.
Everybody, and of course, the difference between those two numbers is that, and you can see that in the D-transfer tax, right? Well, all this D-transfer tax, it's illustrative of the churn that's going on in the real estate market, and that's what's driving the higher rate. Thank goodness.
Okay, so it's 2.1. That's
Is the CPI.
okay. Fine. Yeah. I guess that's it. Well, thanks for that. Just on the micro side, there's obviously a number of wobble factors in there. I'm actually curious about, and that's,
Sorry, can we make a note for this? Cause this, I think that would be great to have, like, actually, can you make a note about the 2.1 and 3.79 and how the 3.36 is arrived at? Yeah, sorry, Brian, it's just, I mean, it's a great question. And I think it could be illuminated better in the document for people.
I mean, there are some properties that are paying twice as much tax post-sale versus pre-sale.
oh, wait,
Right.
well aware of that.
Yeah,
Particular issue is more a matter of 2.1 appears elsewhere in the budget document, with in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same elsewhere.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, okay.
But the way that the cap distorts the distribution of that is worth having a note about.
Just one question, just seemed odd to me, that's all. On page 29, it said the employee salaries, finance, 187,000, and benefits, 51,000, 21. Benefits, 51,000 benefits over 187. It seems a huge proportion.
25%.
But if I may, I think, Your Worship, that is because this, the salary portion is an allocated amount. Is that correct? So there's other salaries appearing in other departments that are part of the total, which is part of that, but the benefits are the total.
Is that the case? Is that what's happening? Your time to the water utility is salaried over the water utility, but your benefits are staying here?
Let me double check. I just want to make sure that I'm.
No, it won't be you in the budget year. We're picking on you, but we're in the finance section.
Yeah, no, I just want to double check that. I don't want to speak out of turn. It's a big spreadsheet, so let me just confirm that right now since I have my question. So I know for a fact the salary is, so the way that we do the benefits, so the benefits, yeah, the benefits are just, yeah, they're allocated to a specific fund. So they are allocated proportionally.
Oh, there.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've had this question for you a couple of times, that in all departments, the ratio of salaries and benefits don't necessarily line up. So Brian's question,
That
the
includes-
ratio looks,
So
That
it,
includes CPP.
CPP, WCB, all that good stuff, group benefits, pension. It doesn't mean that, I'm just trying to think here how best to. So if my time is allocated to 5 departments, the way that our payroll spreadsheet works, it doesn't mean that the benefits are allocated to those specific
Okay,
accounts as well. So it is, I guess, a little bit confusing because
so on a consolidated.
on a consolidated basis, it is all proportional, but I see what you're saying. It looks a little wonky within each department. And it's just the way that we have to bill each.
yes, but, well, no, that makes way more sense. Because
Yeah.
you just even look back at the main section, the same amount of benefit for $100,000 more salaries.
Yeah.
So what's happening? Well, what's happening is like
Well-
$100,000 of finance salaries are allocated. Well, not.
You know, Brian makes a good
Right,
point though, but
yeah.
like CPP2 is a big
Yeah.
number,
It is a big number.
right? So that's a new payroll tax. It's only started in, well, 2024, 2025. So this is, I think, our second, this is our second or third year paying that now. Second year paying that.
Yeah,
So this is like, that's a whole new payroll tax that didn't exist historically.
Mhm.
For most of our senior managers. I would say pretty much, it's probably most of our employees have been CPP now. Anybody over 75, right?
Yep,
I agree, yeah.
let's
So
say.
I think it's a good point about like what's making, but you think 5.9% for CPI 1, 4% for CPI 2, 1.6% for EI, plus pensions and benefits, plus medical, dental, health and welfare, like health and wellness. I mean, it adds up, Brian, I guess is the point.
Yeah.
It adds up.
It's, yeah, Ray's looking into that right now. Got a call about it.
Yeah, I got a call actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't got returned this.
Not your first priority?
I'd be worried. Yeah, I can see already. Anyway, so far as the rest is concerned, there are wobble things in there. Tree plantings, 50,000 funding coming. Apparently, I wonder about the anti-racism budget of 2,600, given what's happened in the last couple of days. Where it's Yeah,
I can
unclear
comment on
picture.
that one. I think, you know, we have had an alternative scenario if we need to comply with Georgia legislation of putting in-house resources to the development of a plan document or implementation document. So that likely will not cost any additional. However, that funding we left in thinking, well, at the very least, it would cover necessary engagement sessions, things that would happen, you know, where it's existing staff, but there's still some associated costs. So, you know, that's where we would expect that.
I was thinking more of the operating costs of the committee itself, if modal is out.
So I guess same thing, we could contribute that 2,600 to the ongoing operating of the committee.
Okay, so we can.
In a scenario in which there might still be an operating committee, but if there isn't, I think we'd still want to leave the money in, because we'll probably hold some public. Voice that, you know, I mean, so.
What page is that, shown up?
33.
33?
26 allocation.
It was what Chester had advised us to include under the municipal agreement, so that's really been, you know, a contribution to that.
Oh,
If it's not that, then it would still, I think staff's assumption would be necessary to complete the objectives of that.
Whereas the actual contribution to salary continues to September.
That's true, I guess it does, so we would still be obligated to that, yeah.
So that's my point.
Yeah, to the salary.
Yeah.
Whereas,
It wasn't all salary, but the salary would continue, yeah.
Anyway, it's what I would call a wobble factor. We don't really know. Swimming pool one on page 39. Did we decide that? I thought that was cool.
I think we're gonna
Decided.
discuss that in the grant.
No, I mean, and we're gonna discuss it, however we're gonna discuss it, we discuss now, I mean, it's not, I wanted to confirm the grant line this morning, I would love them to confirm their funding lines today too, I told them likely the end of the month before we have an answer, so.
And in case.
This is their request, I noticed that request.
Yes, so everything subsidy wise and grant wise have been put in at full value, and then we'll adjust for
Okay, fine.
council's recommendation.
But yeah, if you have any input on whether you think it should or shouldn't be at that level today, is relevant as any time.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in due course. Other comments really are being covered primarily by Joe and other questions. I do see problems going forward. Debt service cost alone, in not this year, but in the ensuing year. But we've got 6 million for Edgewater. There's a fire truck somewhere in there. So that adds up to 700,000 or 800,000 bucks a year more to find.
I don't think
We're at 138,000 a year at the moment for $1 million.
I think we need to.
What page are you on? 40?
No, so the distribution of those borrowing costs between town general and the utilities to consider.
Yeah. It's a fair point though, Brian.
Yeah.
The debt increase is going up. It's not that we don't have money to fund it, just who's gonna pay it? Well, what?
And somewhere between.
Well,
half
we
and
have to
third
pay
is
it.
what it is utility, yeah, so,
Yeah,
yeah, but you know, you're totally right.
And
That is,
when you add that to the reserve issue, depending on how that one breaks out, you could be close to $1 million.
but we've got, that's fair too, but if you look at the debt schedule, we've got a lot of loans that are rolling off too. Like if you look at the debt payments this year, they're actually lower than 2 years ago. So we have historical loans that we're working off.
That's an incrementally.
About the same, actually, when you look at the debt schedule. It's not, I mean, I take your point, but that's all based on the utilities being in a position to take their pain, which we talked about the splits at the last council meeting about how much of the Edgewater debt the water utility would be able to absorb. And as we've just talked, when we talk about water utility, it's like you can say it's going to take the allocation, but if there's no cash to pay it, I think we get enough in that. I think that's the conversation. We're going to just need enough time, breathe time to make sure there's a consensus around council to, because we're really massively subsidizing the water utility.
well, and again, you know, talking about things that are coming this year, and hopefully a better opportunity to kind of reconcile the water utility we have in this budget, a rate study for both water and wastewater. If those are carried out with consultants, council will have, I think, a much better picture. Yeah.
It's just the go forward things that we have to discuss this year. The last thing, I'm kind of confused with the last 3 pages as it relates to grants and accommodations and whatnot. There are 3 separate pages. One is the list of applications for this year. The next page is by the way, 66, 67, 68. The next page has libraries and wheels and museums and what have you, which is a different series of.
Subsidies, so those typically go on for more than 1 year.
Okay.
And there are,
And then the
just a
last page is-
restatement of numbers that are in the rest of the budget, so that page is just there to show the town's support for those various organizations.
And the last page is about exemptions. Based on founders. What happens with, which is the region, fire, all that kind of thing? They're exempt already?
They don't get packed up. They don't get picked up in the taxable assessment.
So they kind of what we referenced away.
But we don't even know what's being exempted, they're exempt at a level that they're not even assessed, like we don't know
Yeah.
how we should exempt them ourselves.
Okay, fine.
That's the fire station property?
No, the churches.
The region, anything that's exempt from taxation at the federal level.
Well, that's where the explanation comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So we only grant exemption to these ones that are cited, everything else is tax exempt, is granted by a higher order.
What's covered under federal regulation?
The Legion and churches, I think it's just the Legion and churches, control their own properties or the predominantly exempt, obviously, so federal owned property, provincial owned property, churches and Legion, I think are all the.
So the liquor stores.
And that's why we get that grant in exchange.
Yeah, 30,000.
So if a building is core to the town services, it's exempt. So it doesn't get picked up in the tax assessment that calculates education and the police force costs. But it could be a town property that's not exempt. So, I mean, I don't know how many Dylan and I talked for years about, we try to make sure that, because our garage that we had over here, which is now a parking lot, was actually driving costs for the town to pay into education. So like the VIC today, which is, these are inconsequential amounts of money. It's just more of a theoretical idea, but we don't pay taxes on the public works building or the town hall or those kinds of things. But those costs, they do show up in this, in the overall assessment base. So when Ashley first gets her big package from PVSC, it's just big, huge number. And Billy's like, where's that number coming from? Because they include like the cemeteries and the schools and all kinds of things.
I said, well, at the end of the day, we would be paying the taxes to ourselves, we just won't collect them, whatever. But to Joe's point, without having had PBSC actually exempt them, they're still being counted in taxable assessment and therefore contributing to any formula that takes taxable assessment to determine our allocation of education. So that's where, if they put a value on the cemetery,
we try to get it exempt.
Tax it, we still end up paying like a tiny fraction on the education tax to the province based on that. So that's where Joe's point is, it would be.
It's real money.
When we have time, Ashley's successor, when we have time, because Ashley's taking care of all the girls. We'll fix those issues.
I guess I'm wondering how we pay the RCMP, like, how is that determined?
On assessment.
No, I mean, it's not.
Oh, is
The
it?
RCMP number is just on our service level. So basically, we're in the provincial police service agreement, which means that we've signed on for a certain level of service, which is defined by the number of officers. It's a very typical metric. It has no relationship with level of service, but that's how it works. So we're in for a certain number of officers, every municipality is in for a certain number of officers. It's really a number that is based to say, like, what share of the RCMP's resources expressed as an officer does it take? That's not in relation to the actual officer. But that is an arbitrary number that we've signed up for based on methodology that says it's the appropriate number for our community, for our necessary level of policing service. But it is a fixed multiplier of a per officer number set at a larger, higher level. In every municipality, that number changes, but it's their fixed officer count number that gets multiplied by whatever that number is, the allocation.
In our case, it's 2.5, isn't it?
I think it is, but it's very low, like in principle, if you actually consider what that would look like, clearly that's not a police force. Because each officer doesn't represent an actual number of officers at the disposal of the RCP.
How is that tracked? I mean, how do we know that we're actually getting 2.5 person hours? Because we don't have, we don't have dedicated 2.5 people.
Yeah, not at all.
No, so how does it actually get tracked, whether we actually get that amount of service over a month or over a year?
I should sit on the police advisory and I'm back on police, but they give us stats quarterly about how many calls they answered, what the nature of the calls. And I think looking at that, you can say, you know, compared, and it looks at Bridgewater and the county, you know, Lowell. And I think looking at that, you could say, well, yes, they're answering this many calls and
I think that is the only way to do it. It's right now they don't, because we're under the provincial police service agreement, they don't provide us information on available resources. Then they're not accountable to do that. So what they say is, here's what we accomplished with the resources. That is a relatively good phenomenon. So obviously town used to have its own department, but there's a number of municipalities, 35 on a direct police services agreement. So that gives you oversight to actually give you monthly reports on resourcing levels. And they credit municipalities if those levels are not met. But that is not the agreement we have. We have a fixed cost, which is great if the resourcing levels go high, but you know, if they're low, we don't benefit from that. And that just, we have your predictable costs, but we don't get to know behind the scenes. If the service seems to drop off, then we can assume the resources might be the goal.
Okay, I've got one actual one as opposed to Karen's observation. The grants that we provide to the community, I'm not sure there's a policy surrounding this. I mean, I went through it once, I guess, but I can't recall the details. Seems to me we should just put grants that it says immediate area impact and it's the communities or other type. Looking at the numbers involved, we're at last year is 29,000, and obviously this year there's been a number of hits to a number of these organisations that of provincial cutbacks and the like. I know one in particular, but more generally, as was mentioned earlier, the town got rid of its recreation department a number of years ago to save money. People in the town have picked it up one way or another in various forms. And I think we're like this from given how much money we're spending on other projects and issues. Seems to me 29,000 divided by so many people with the exception of Home United, which is the rises to the top by sheer numbers of kids that are involved with this. I think we could stretch a little further and have a little bit more in this particular budget line for a suggestion. And if I added up who I would like to give money to, no doubt this will be decided later on exactly. And I can get to, and I'm not sure about the BIC, by the way. That seems to be an odd one here. The BIC, Visitor Information Centre, $7,500. But without BIC, I think $34,000 of modest cutbacks. I'm just suggesting this year that we stretch a little bit further to help these communities who do an absolutely fantastic job, bring a lot of business into town, look after a lot of the kids, and so on. So that's my list.
Yes, they may be up to 35K. Yeah.
And which one was that?
Grants organization side, which is a key thing we wanted to decide this morning. So thank you, Brian, for coming.
So those were individual comments on the grants list. Are we entering that conversation now with the grant?
Well, I don't know whether we are.
We may as well continue.
So he wasn't, I mean, probably making one of the things he pointed in there, but I think the point is the overall line, out of which we do allocation, we suggest 35,000. is an increase in 29. What we do want to cover this morning, if at all possible, is that overall line. We didn't intend to get into the specific hour budgets this morning.
Was the suggested line 35,000?
No, the suggested was 29. Brian suggested 35. Yeah.
Is
So
the,
Brian
is the
suggested
budget
we-
based on 59?
Wait, can I just have one
Person
person?
is based on 29, like it was last.
Can I just get an answer to my question? So the 25-26 grants were 29.9.
Yeah.
What is the suggested amount for this year?
So in the draft budget, it's still 29.9.
Still 29.9 in the draft.
It's suggested to bring it up to 35.
By Brian,
Okay,
just now.
okay, that was a suggestion.
But the applications received are already 52.
Yeah, right.
Depending on how you.
52 plus.
And
You said
then
like
I think
Yeah.
everybody gets everything that they ask for. Is that, and the big, is the one factor, if you improve the big, then it gets you up to 40,000, sound pretty easy.
Are we having the grants discussion now?
Yeah, I suggest we continue at it since we're here.
Okay, to get it done. I regret that I did not, see I did not manage to read the full package of the applications. So, after Councillor Palford referred to the big application, I would like to know more about what's in the application, if somebody can do a synopsis.
So I think what we usually do, Council Carver, is we just decide on an overall budget and then the CAO will go back and allocate what he thinks within that 35,000. And then next week you all will approve line by line. So that would give you the opportunity to review the grants. I'm sure we could change it. That's just normally
Yeah.
what we do.
That is what we're just looking to confirm the bottom line, so that then in the new version of the budget for next Friday, I'll present a proposed allocation out of whatever that total is.
I see, okay. Well, in general, I agree with the idea of the closest to home ones that apply most directly to activities of the population of the town. So yes, I agree with that.
Can I just quickly comment? 'Cause,
Yes.
I think historically, one of the things we've said to your point, Councillor Carver, is we won't allocate funds to large national organizations that have their own fundraising capabilities, like, for instance, is one here.
Yeah.
Kidney Foundation.
Yeah, the Kidney Foundation is another example. I mean, yeah, there's other.
See, this in Nepal really depends on parish.
Yeah,
Parishioners. There's no national.
Oh, okay. A national organization, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Just, sorry, and just to, in context for me to understand and maybe for the viewers, is how long have we been running this program?
I don't think it's.
Yeah.
For a long time?
Like
Since 2012.
And this is all money that's coming from the town, it's not, we're not getting grants from somebody else. Okay, so, okay.
And the actual policy, Brian asked, what is the state policy? On Monday evening's policy strategy meeting, we will actually be reviewing that policy and a proposed update, and Eric's prepared that stuff. The agenda stuff should go out while we're here. It is a little late because we just shifted that meeting from the 27th to the 20th, so Eric was given a, hey, you got 2 days to get that package out. So, the package will be out by the time we leave here this morning, is my expectation. So you can look at the grants policy over the week. But that won't affect these grants, that's next.
My suggestion is 35 does not take into account but it seems to be a different proposition, almost a different line.
I think we have an ongoing discussion with the chamber. Last year they requested a lot, they toned it down a bit, but they're looking for the town to take on the administrative costs of operating this information center in whole or in part. And I will say that my position is that I'm just going to keep that money where it is. You guys can review it and discuss the merits next week, but whatever number you pick now, I'm thinking it's something that I'm going to use.
Administrative cost, that's absorbed within the existing administrative salaries, et cetera, no cash out.
No, I mean, they are looking for their salary.
So, I mean,
Discount.
so
Yeah.
the town has this building that is on town property that the town's responsible for 100% of the capital. I think we covered the electricity, we covered the water, we just spent
You with the phone and
a
internet.
ton of money, right? So, like, essentially, it's, and what I'm hearing, Dylan, basically the chamber saying we don't want to have anything to do with the Vic anymore. We just want the town to run the Vic on our behalf.
Or if they want us to take on as much of the cost of it as
Yeah,
possible.
it's-
I mean, they'd like to
It's
see a
the
bond.
it's the financial issue.
So it's 2026, and you ask yourself, almost the Vic at the border between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick just closed. Like the
Yeah.
major Vic is, I mean, I don't know how many, this seems like it's an antiquated business model to me, but we do have a lease, right? And so, and I think the lease is for a few more years, isn't it, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to how they use it, like.
Well, we've said that they can't use it for commercial purposes, which has always been a hill to die on, as I've weighed in on this time to time, because of its proximity to like a historical burial ground that's a heritage protected area.
We did nuance that a little bit, we did give them some permission.
Very boxed in vending on very specific reasons with quite a bit of oversight around that. Like it's not going to become a carnival area there. Was our arrangement
Yeah.
with those folks.
So that's the one thing I guess we can consider, we are, we didn't want to go to cash. We have some ability to, encourage them to find revenue from that property or to discourage them to do so.
How long is the lease?
I don't have it in front of me, I think it was at least 10 years when it was signed.
Okay.
Was it that long? Yeah. Well, it's probably been
5
5 years.
It might have been 5 and 5, but I would think it would have been an option to renew for up to. at least-
Could you let us know?
Yeah.
Curious to know.
So for discussion purposes, I said 35, or including vacancy, discussion purposes, I would say.
Well, I said I wouldn't be including the Vic unless you direct me to today, but that's at your discretion.
And I can't participate in directing you anyway, because I haven't read the document.
Well, it's only a draft, I'm just reading the draft first, the budget, so.
And did I understand Councillor Palferman just revised his 35,000 estimate?
Yes.
And that includes.
Let's just let that one work its way through and we get on Monday to look at this actual breakout and propose and see where it gets. us.
So
Do you not see it towards?
40,000 is roughly 25% increase from last year,
Yes,
an extra 10%.
uh,
I mean, 10,000.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Did I see a tourism line somewhere? Yeah.
As we discussed last week.
Yeah.
That has the Vic expenses, that's the email I sent out with the.
Yeah, yeah.
As well as the bells.
Where's
So
So
why
that's all
is
we-
it here? Why is it here on?
So this is more staffing, this is more,
The
so.
show already kind of, we already paid a lot of the cost, the operating costs, utilities, the email, phone, everything from the IT. We don't pay the salaries, they're requesting that we.
You're all volunteers. Except
Not
for
the
the
summer
students, and some
Yeah.
students.
Well, that's the point.
And
The
they-
person who's doing it, a full-time
Yeah,
job,
it is.
and doing it as a volunteer
Yeah.
is, they have, I think they have paid staff in the past, I'm not quite sure why not now. There may be more information included in their application about the chamber budget, possibly.
Yeah, everybody should take a look at that by next week, I mean, we'll be talking about it again next. Based on
It's my guess that it has to do with their budget.
Yeah.
But is their annual flower basket request in this category?
No,
Different
because we
sales.
took it over last year, remember? They asked us to take it over completely, that's why we
Yeah.
bought the watering.
Fair enough, Mayor. I'm just wondering where is that line item? Is that line of
flowers, now it's all absorbed in the,
Uh-huh.
we do it now.
Yeah.
Reallocating the cost too.
And what is that like? That's like a $20,000 annual investment too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be quantified out in terms of the time, hopefully you're not far off.
Like, I'm open-minded about council weighing in on whether the town wants to run the VIC for all of the benefits for the region that they have. We'll see how it plays out, but I don't want to be half in, half out. Like, we own the building, we own the land, we're paying all the electrical, paying for the snow removal, we're paying for all the repairs. Last year, we just got a cold call and needed to come up with $8,000 to do a deck. Right? We needed this, we needed that. It came in and we, oh, sorry, we did that. Really, the only responsibility was finding staff to work in the bank and then figure out what to do, how to manage the day to day of the bank. And if that's no longer going to be under the purview of the chamber, if they want us to take on that too, okay, I guess we can take it under advisement. But it doesn't strike me that the VIC is a town service.
Well, and I would wonder how many visits do they have, like, you know, ask yourself, how many brochure they've watched them.
Like, I mean, last year's an anomaly with the construction, but fair enough, Heather. I mean, I just think like fundamentally is the VIC a town service that
And
the
is it something
taxpayer should
people
finance?
Are they actually
Mhm.
stopping, like, or are they spending money?
I think this year is not really gonna be a better.
Oh, yeah, sure. Anyway, I'm sure the chamber will have an opinion on that. That would be worth hearing.
I wonder if they have stats.
I'm hoping that all the information required is enough,
Yeah,
including their budget.
Yeah.
Which would help assess where those things are. And I appreciate the deputy mayor's comments about half in, half out, because it's sort of the same thing as the issues around communities in bloom, half in, half out. So it's a delicate little balance. And we're more in than half out in a way.
I found the lease. So it's actually, it's a 5-year with a 5-year option review. The first 5 years is up May 2nd, 2027. So about a year from the first 5 years of the potential 10 years. Yeah. So that's probably that May 22nd, 2027 is a good deadline in that we use this year for the discussion about the long-term fate. In the meantime, they've turned down the grant request, so it's not 25,000, which we thought might go down. So, you know, next week we can talk about 5,000.
It was not a touchdown.
35 or 40 are some suggestions for I'll need a direction by motion at some point.
Can you just delineate between the request under this category for the football club versus the organizational grant, which is, I think, another close to 30,000? Are
These are always capital. They've always, because of the nature of a grant organization, doesn't work out to improvement, and you're typically applying for a specific capital improvement. I have to go check.
Okay, so
I have, sorry, the 16,000 is actually for 6,000 for the cold storage area, resurfacing, and 10,000 for an irrigation system,
And I
so.
can speak to the goal system. Last year, we couldn't afford to do it, so, where we did that is the paved track. Between that track and the ditch fence that we put in, so there's a nice good labor. There's nice fence there, along the ditch to keep the balls from going to the ditch. Between the fence and the ditch is where they store the coals. They had asked if that could be not grass. It could be gravel or paved, because that it is easier for them moving the goals on and off of it if it's not grass. So this is just between the fence and the other side of the track, on the side facing the ditch, facing Fairmont Street. So that strip where all the poles are stored. And so that is what they'd like to do, is resurface that. And so they're looking for support for the capital cost of resurfacing. Ultimately, we own the improvement, but I'm not sure it's improvement except for the purpose of coal storage.
I just want there to be some clarity around. So we had an impromptu request only a month ago from the club saying we want council support to apply to this grant. And the first thing that came, we looked at it and said, well, we're in a difficult position to fund the match this year, and we'd prefer if you deferred it. Was the recommendation of Council Carver. There was, I think, consensus around the table. It's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And then they came back to say, oh no, you misinterpreted our request. We promise you, we are absolutely not going to ask for a red cent. But all we need from you is we just need a letter from you saying that you support the project. Seems to me that like, so as long as this money is not to support that project, and it's not that I'm not even open-minded about hearing all about it. Like maybe this is the best $10,000 we're going to spend. It has to be fair to council on giving us all of the relevant information in the right cadence so that we can evaluate. I don't like the idea that oh, we're just going to tell council we're not going to ask these guys for any money. They're not even going to remember that. Then a month later, I'm going to go in Ashley and say, "Can we have $10,000 and we'll fund it that way?" TE. I'm not. I just come on. Let's be fair. This group gets an incredible amount of money from the town, and they're doing amazing work. And we're all we support the town writ large, the town, the community, the taxpayers fully support the Mahone Bay Center, but they have to be absolutely fair on their requests. And I'm wondering, I just want to make sure there's no double counting here because I would be a little perturbed if that was the case. Maybe that's not the case, but I'm a little surprised they're looking for $16,000 in grants, considering they just came to us a month ago saying they didn't need a cent.
You said Mahone Bay Centre.
I meant, pardon me,
I know.
right, the Mahone Bay,
Yes,
yes,
for the record.
yes, right, the Mahone Bay Soccer Club, right. Anyway, we're open-minded about hearing anything that the club wants to do. They have to be completely transparent about what they need the money for and what the town's contributions are. Anyway, I'm remembering that right, aren't I?
Well, the irrigation thing I thought was what they came asking, and we said, well,
No, was our answer.
We said no,
yeah,
delay for,
so is that coming up in? Or is this grant only for the paving?
It's for both. This is 6,000 for the paving and 10,000 for the irrigation.
the vote for irrigation.
Yes.
I think, so I've gone back.
Take that away, Ashley. We don't need to, anyway, I think you made the point. We don't need to deliberate on it that way. I think there should be some clarity about.
We felt we don't have enough evidence, but we will have votes, and that was our reason. We wanted to see how things go, and before we try to invest. Because it is a large money, so and we don't know how much it will end up costing in the long
And you
run
pay.
too. It may be more than 10,000. So,
That's a
I
$16,000
think Council
request, right?
Wilson had something he wanted to say, did you? No, okay, then Council Paul.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that, in consideration of the cutbacks from the province on funding for some of the organizations applying for grants, and in light of the new requests that substantially are intended to put the town on the map from a marketing point of view, such as the various festivals, Communities in Bloom, the museum, that we increase the grant amount from 29,900 to $40,000 for the fiscal year approaching.
Is there something for that? Second for that motion? Councilor Boone? Okay, discussion. No, Councilor Fairman?
Just curious what the motion made specific reference to certain organizations rather than making it a global number.
It's no, there was only examples of rationale of what has happened, changed the mix of applicants coming forward requesting funding. It has nothing to do with the value of other applicants for grants. It's just that the mix has changed over the last couple of years to include um, various initiatives that assist the town development of tourism business, if you will.
If I may, that proposal sounds to me as if it fits in the policy, the grants policy, rather than in its budget document. Which,
It's only a rationale for business. It's quite simply, I'm proposing $40,000 because
This budget year.
for this budget year.
well, I support the idea of increasing that amount for this budget year, but I don't think that including the references to those other or specific organizations
It
helps the
doesn't have to be
motion.
limited, it's my preamble to the motion.
Yeah, it's,
The motion is-
I only recorded the grants line increase to $40,000.
I see, all right.
I just took that stuff to be a preamble.
Oh.
Kelly's not here.
Just attribute it to the fact that my ears and my brain can't quite process everything else. So I'll certainly support that motion of 40,000.
There, I'll also have to do the second.
Yeah.
Brian,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Kevin, pardon me.
Any other comments or questions, discussion? No? All right, people comfortable with this? Yes?
I just wanted to Joe's comments. Is it relevant then to just get some clarity in terms of the asks from the soccer association around the language around what this money's for?
So Tim was here making a presentation, I believe, before Christmas.
I think, your grants package includes information on what your request is for.
Okay.
So, you've
I can
received
go
the
back to it.
information last Friday to go, yeah. So between now and next Friday, when you'll see what I would recommend based on 40,000 motion passes, then you could say, well, I don't know if I'd support that or I would support that, so go check out what the application actually says.
We're gonna have another kick on the site.
Yeah, this is telling me to now populate it based on $40,000, because we're doing a revised budget for next week.
And
Okay.
what about the piece we're removing national or?
Well, that's good for me to consider, and you guys can weigh in if you don't feel like I adequately reflected your sentiments in that, but as far as changing the policy, that is on the agenda for Monday evening,
Yes.
and I can confirm, almost to the second when I said, Eric's going to be sending this out right now, he did send it out, he did send your email now, so. Yeah, there's kind of two things, one is informally this year, next is maybe formally in the policy.
Council.
And with the $40,000 line up that the staff is going to provide, it's going to include the holdback for late applications to increase.
Yeah, I would like to
increase it
At least three,
proportionate. to
at least two.
yeah, a couple thousand.
Yeah, I would say at least two, but we'll see. We'll see.
And you'll still have that little kitty princess.
That's what you're saying. That's a big iron for you, at least.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other things here that we need to consider?
Sorry, I'm just gonna forward council a couple of emails between Tim and I, just to ensure there's full circle on the conversation with the irrigation system, because I know we had a presentation here, and then I'm not
So we
sure.
agreed to support them looking for external funding, but we did not agree to contribute funding. But
Yeah,
that doesn't
so I
mean
just-
We didn't say, we said we'd talk about it during the budget, so we didn't reject it, we said we'd talk about it during the budget.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna send some, just some, he sent an infrastructure request letter, I'm not sure if you guys received it. I'm gonna send it as extra information, just in case you don't have it,
Or added to that grant package.
I already sent it,
Oh, you
it's not
sent
late,
that?
no,
I was just adding.
So-
I just zipped it.
Send this in.
I thought we discussed it and we did reject it.
I thought we.
But-
No, you did refer to the budget.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
referred to budget.
All right, well,
Well, you can
Again,
still
I'm-
reject it next week.
okay.
So we need to vote.
We need to
Uh,
vote. Ready to vote?
yeah.
All those in favor, signify aye. Opposed? Oh. good. Unanimous. Yes, we rock. Okay, thank you for that, and I am keeping in mind, this is a very, some of the budget cuts have been very devastating to local organizations.
Mhm.
And this, I think the intent for Council to bring this motion forward. This is not a regular budget. You know, we may go back next year to 29,000 again.
Which brings all the money back.
Yeah. When we find new sources of funding, right?
But it's interesting in the scale of the whole budget, the time and energy and cost that goes into this particular item compared to the
It's
proportional.
a universal constant amongst councils,
Yeah.
the focus is on this item.
These organizations hit individuals personally in their quality of life, you know,
Totally.
that, you know, it enhances human
Yeah.
spirit as well. So I think that's why we spend time on it. Counselor.
Mayor, can we just spend a moment on page 67 while we're on kind of this topic, and just want to make sure everyone's of the same opinion around the grants to the organizations, or I guess these are the subsidies, slightly different. So I think the swimming pool request deserves some context, and of course, the swimming pool society is kind of a smaller, more much smaller team that relies on volunteers to run the pool system, and I think that budget increase illustrates a couple transformational things that happened last year. Of course, 2025 was the final year for the Lions Club, which was the original benefactor of the pool and was a large contributor annually to the pool's operating budget. And in the absence of the Lions Club being a charitable organization, a fundraising arm now really for the pool, there's a big gap. So the other issue is around the training recruitment of pool staff. It's not like you can go to John Wheeler anymore and get them to work up there for minimum wage. Those days are over. Of course, so you need credentialed employees that have training, of which the Pool Society also supports, and there's a competitive aspect of getting those scarce resources. So, just trying to find qualified lifeguards, and as well pool costs for things. And Dylan and Jonathan are a lot closer to this than I am, but just in discussions with the Pool Society, like the chemical costs, the new pumps that have been installed. I mean, just the operations of a pool that's 50 years old. And although we made a large capital investment 2 years ago to give it a 5-year life curve extension until we figure out what the new pool is going to look like in 2030, I mean, the operating costs of running the old legacy pool are higher. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing, what we're seeing in 2025 actuals is the Pool Society drawing down on 80% of their historical reserves to fund operating shortfalls. And what we really see in the budget request for 2026-27 is a more realistic view of all the cash required to run the program for the year.
Can I ask about the in-kind work we do? Is there a line, something that can be added in the notes with the in-kind? Because now the town is setting up the pool and then putting it to bed for the winter and doing more in-kind work. That's valuable too. It doesn't have to go here with the 40,000, but as a note so that we know that that's a contribution. It's like when we talk about the VIC, all the in-kind that we provide for the VIC, that should be noted somewhere.
Yeah.
It's substantial.
Well, they stand.
I think the only other thing I'd say, Mayor, about this line item is I think council, there's a benefit of council kind of weighing in with our opinion on that target number and that application. Like the Pied Piper, here we are, it's April, it's going to be May. I think it's important for the Pool Society to start advertising 2025, get their information, when's our start date, what's good for employees, signing up for grants and all those kinds of things.
And in particular, I just wanted to call attention, the budget request from the society was 30,000 on the thought that they could raise 10,000 on revenue pools operation this summer,
Right.
We've put 40,000 in because we also forwarded budget staff recommendation that the pool should be free, that they should promote the pool as being free, and that we should use that to promote the capital campaign. And that ultimately the shortfall in fundraising activities would end up with us needing to give them $40,000. So that's, the 30 to 40 is another, point of discussion. But all the more important that they determine if they're promoting the pool, bring people back after a number of years of very limited promotion. And we have a communications person who's coming to really push that and make sure that the promotion is really excellent. Are they trying to bring in revenue, or hopefully are they trying to just increase usership and get the capital campaign actually off to the races? On that note, we did just hear that we are the Smile Cookie choice for Tim Hortons again. So that's supposed to be supporting again this overall capital campaign that, if it could be boosted with the idea of whatever the summer season can look like as soon as possible, there's some definite relevance to making a decision on that point sooner than later.
So the suggestion is that by 7,000, 10,000 would earn more than that in donations.
Yeah, or at least leverage more than that in capital. Yeah.
Wow.
And is the town running that capital thing, or is it full society?
You mean the Smile Cookie one specifically?
No,
Or-
but-
the overall capital campaign is primarily being carried by the town.
Okay,
But the goal this year is to bring it out from that and really get some boosting in public, and the summer season would be the best opportunity.
Deep into a particular subject here, but is there a marketing plan of some variety and set to go?
So what I would say on that is our staff have been trying to work with the Pool Society to develop that since last fall. We've pitched a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we don't necessarily have a go from them. What it comes down to, as I understand it, is that the society has said, look, if we don't have $30,000, we're not even gonna have this season, so what are we talking about marketing? So they've come back with this request for 30, that they feel needs to be addressed before really being able to commit to an effort to market the pool season. It's a Joe's point about them wanting to know that before, which is really hard. I mean, we would have agree last fall to just generally assume the pool would be open.
Yeah, so I mean, the facility struggled because we have an asset that's at the end of its useful life. And we've made big contributions towards extending the life for the extra 5 years. But I mean, it's a bumpy road between, May 15th and the day the pool opens at the end of June. And it's always like, oh, is the pool going to open? The pool not going to open? Fortunately, I think some of the major pain that was experienced last year, which shortened the season, is going to be overcome this year by being a little more proactive and having the town's engagement higher, because they've come to the town looking for more support on the operation. So
Jonathan will make sure the pool
Right.
itself is open. Whether
So-
there's people there to run it, that's a $30,000 question.
the people that are closest to the pool and use it the most are of the opinion that telegraphing that the pool is going to be open and run and ready to roll at the end of June is mission critical, and making sure that the community understands that on the 26th or the 27th of June, or whatever the last day of school is, the annual pool party is going to get kicked off, and we got lifeguards and come on up and have a great summer in the water. It's important to have that message out to the community by Victoria Day at the latest.
So from a budgetary point of view, we provided for 40,000, we could guarantee them the 30,000, and the extra 10,000 is dependent upon coming to some arrangement about marketing.
Potentially, but taking time on that means there's already promoting it as something that is either is free or has a cost that we still coverage.
Is there anything to prevent the town from doing promotion via our own social media as soon as a budget is approved? And then the onus is on the society to make it happen. All the things in place to make it happen.
Clearly, this is very excited to promote, but we'd love to do it in lockstep with a voluntary society.
Just so we're all on the same line, the delta between 40 and 30 is the pool fees children
That's
would
right.
pay.
Yeah.
So what they're basically saying is, what, for that amount of money, like, let's make sure, given last year's, we were so short activity because schools only open 5 weeks.
And these are town.
Yeah,
and
so just saying, like, lower the barrier to entry to
yeah.
get the numbers up.
Like, I know as a pool user who's there 3 or 4 times every week with my son, I will happily donate my membership to the capital campaign if someone just says, hey, the memberships are free, but you could donate it to us. I will do that. If they forget to say that, who knows what I'll do.
Anyway, Mayor, so I think the budget's based on those assumptions.
But just be quick, this not say you come from Bloomberg. Free school.
Well, I mean,
Well, so the administration, who is paying for it or not paying for it, I mean, we could tell them to ask people if they're residents and charge them if not. This was to not
Local
charge,
contribute.
this was to
right?
not charge at all, because like a lot of the users, they don't charge that item. The model that was presented was just like the pool doesn't have a charge for it. It's-
Okay, I just don't want it over, like, if it's free, are people going to come from everywhere to swim in a free pool? And will we be
Yes.
overcrowded? There's no chance of.
I mean, it hasn't been considered a risk.
Okay.
let's hope.
If the swimming lessons were free, I think that would be a thing, so the swimming
Oh,
lessons.
swimming freeze, swimming lessons will still.
Well, I think that would only be for
Oh, right,
residents.
yeah.
That would be my understanding. Swimming lessons would be free for residents. If you wanted free swimming lessons, we're gonna have residents, make sure they get.
So it wouldn't cover the free swims periods.
It would kind of,
Yeah.
everything would be free, but if you're enrolling your children in swimming lessons, the freeness would be contingent on showing that you're a town resident.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
So, if I may, Mayor, I have two
Yeah.
questions. One is, references made to children, but there's also adult users. So the free access to adults as well.
Yeah, because adults aren't doing swimming lessons, there's no programming.
So my second question has to do with the role of, the deputy mayor, who is our appointee. Is that the same relationship as the appointee liaison role to the chamber, or is it different? What is the role of member of council appointee to the society? Is it as a full
I
member?
mean, from my perspective, it is ambiguous because our MOU with the full society is well. And so staff would love this year to get a new MOU in place where we clarify that question. Because if you go back to the MOU was written, the role of the council member was very similar. It was a society that operated largely independently, right, a facility, and we were just kind of keeping it in touch.
Yeah.
But that's not the relationship today.
Yeah.
We're very directly involved with the place.
Right.
To the extent that it wouldn't even be a necessity for council members to be there to keep tabs, because staff are like heavily involved in day to day.
Business models definitely change. Yeah. We would have had modest financial contributions of plus or minus $10,000 to $15,000 a year traditionally. Occasionally capital contributions, and the pool would have raised, the pool society through fees, donations, and hot dog sales, and so on and so forth. They would have raised 90% of their operating budget.
My question was more about the actual role in meetings. Is it as kind of sharing information, or is it as an active member saying, this is an idea of the, you see the difference?
So do you
Yeah.
receive notification of meetings?
I act primarily as an intermediary between the pool society and a vehicle to bring to the attention of council things that the pool society should know
They
about.
reach out to
They
you,
reach out and
but they
say,
don't actually have meetings that you're going to. You're being invited
Right.
to, yeah.
I'm not actively involved in the day-to-day deliberations of the
And
pool
again,
society.
that's not how it was anticipated.
I don't have an opportunity at meetings to inject ideas or thoughts about things that might be useful. So it's a tricky role.
Yeah, so I mean, the volunteer members of the pool society, I don't have a lot of value add to, like, I trust their insight and knowledge of the day-to-day operations of the pool society. You know, the role really is to bring forth from an advocacy perspective their requests and be able to explain them in some kind of way where council can get their head around what the issues of the day are. But as far as management of the pool society or that's not something that I traditionally can play a role.
I think it's a good exercise to imagine, like, with the new pool facility and things off to the races, how do we want these things to work? You know, how do we get from here to there?
You'd have a much different kind of governance model in a new pool.
Yep.
The new Jubilee Park.
And it's essentially how do we get from here to there?
Yeah.
So there was no
Catherine,
discussion.
technically, you had an answer. Maybe you're on Brian's comment.
A lot of questions I had have already been answered.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question.
Cool, on that same page, could I suggest that we increase because we know the bookmobile is valuable as asset and gas vehicles. We know we have not had increases from the funds years and expenses have gone up. And if we just look at the bookmobile, that it's gone up.
What was this?
Frozen doesn't mean we have to be frozen.
Yeah.
What was the suggested number?
Where is that on the, which page are you looking?
And if you want to ask for a second, that could be a vote, whether you're testing the waters or.
Oh, yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? No? Okay, then ask the question. All those in favor signify aye. Oh, the motion is carried. Good move. And the former employee of the.
Drop in the bucket.
Yes.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Mayor?
Oh.
So I have a
Councillor Hart.
question from page 34,
Yes.
about the
It's what we thought that it was too low, so we're gonna have to figure out how to bring it out. Your pressure it's too low. We caught last week that we didn't reflect it coming back to full-time operation.
right, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So that'll be fixed
That would
next
be
week.
next.
okay.
I mean, we're paying for all these changes and increases.
Right.
We'll figure that out, but we're gonna do that next.
Okay, and that explains why it was so low at 25. That was simply not being used.
Yeah, and then it will come back.
But the actual cost of the improvement will all be in the capital budget.
Yeah, and we don't see any reason to believe those improvements will increase the operating costs. So, almost all the improvements you make to stuff do, these ones really shouldn't. There's nothing mechanical that's gonna be much more cost. We already did add the heating system. That wasn't the case yet. That was previous.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is still capital, but this cost was figured that we don't have the ambulance and that happened in Chapter Basin with their newly renovated, universally accessible washroom. Twice, 2 rounds of vandalism.
Where's that?
In Chester Basin.
Oh, I didn't
Here's
hear that.
Wild Rose part.
Oh, it's too bad.
Wild Rose.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, twice.
So their bathrooms just opened and then closed and they kind of,
Yeah, and new, upgraded, universally accessible.
Shelburne had real challenges with its public washrooms being vandalized all the time too, unfortunately.
That's a good question, or my question about that, my on the vandalization that happened, but, are these closed at night?
So ours are, I can't speak to Wild Rose, I think theirs are as well. But
Yeah. They wouldn't be
Dog
accessible.
till dusk operation.
Right, right.
Don't they have cameras? We don't have cameras. These council's discussing here's the strong argument with council from the former deputy mayor in that direction. But you certainly could. And also, I'll stress that our cameras on the closed facilities, so we put cameras on facilities that have fences. We didn't put cameras on public access facilities. But the cameras on the facilities that have fences are not monitored. Safe and hurt you in case something happens. So similarly, if we put them, that's just what I said at the time, but if we put them on public facilities, there wouldn't be someone on a feed on the other end watching people go in and out of the washroom.
No,
It would just be there in case something happened. We check the records. Would be a reasonable addition to council discuss. You know, would you like to see cameras added? Where we're not now, and that had been discussed. Yeah, probably.
Please, on the inside.
Yeah. We do have other options, is just for the sake of counting, for usership, we have a door clicker on the front door. I already told you we're gonna put this back up this season, but, so we can track the number of entries and exits to the washroom facility. Just to say how many users we have. Jonathan can't count out our maintenance uses, so we know how many times every day we would be entering, so we subtract that. So we reported that to council as part of our stats, so we will do that again next week.
We're not like the people who run over the traffic counters back and forth, back and
You
forth, back
can
and
do
forth.
it, you could go ahead and watch it a bunch of times. If the chamber wanted to juice the numbers, they give us.
You referred to, to
To
the police advisory.
Oh,
Because
good.
because that's where it was discussed originally, I think.
Yeah, I know there was a car theft on our street this week, and the cars seemed to go around and cameras in their yard.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say, if we refer to police advisory, and every other conversation we had with police, they would say, that'd be great. Would you consider doing it? We'd find it helpful, but
I think we want to do our own self-interest and insurance.
Just try to paraphrase, your had only to do with the notion of surveillance of public areas. It had nothing to do with the value to the town or the value to the police. I think that was their unequivocal.
Trying.
So can you refer my
sorry.
motion now to?
Sorry, no,
if you want to talk about it. So just.
Yeah, are you, just want to comment?
Cameras?
No, pardon me.
No, but-
Hey, operating budget.
Just because we were last-
There, just one last thing I'll get off my chest. So, balanced budget, flat tax rate, we know I got $100,000 paying coming at us between the next view, right? When we add the operating costs of the washroom, a few of these other tweaks that we made. So let's just say we solve all that problem, but we are absorbing by $100,000 provincially mandated education increase year over year, as well as another $25,000 for policing. These are things we pay for, but we don't control it. We just build for it, and then so you just think about like that. These are real numbers. And you add an extra 25 grand for the pool, another $10,000 for the subsidy. So you can see where the money is going. Like there's a reason why we need the 3.5%, because these are all increased costs that the community doesn't see. The IT costs in joint service support, which for cybersecurity, things that 5 years ago no one would have ever even thought that we were going to. What do you mean we need to spend 20 grand a year on cybersecurity? I mean, it's just the world we live in now. And the final point, just back on fire, I support the increased fire rate in for a couple of reasons. As you see in the fire category, which that is, we're running a modest $25,000 operating surplus, I believe, Ashley, in your fire hall.
Page 45.
25.
It's a good start. Yeah, 25,000. 48 is the.
I know Kevin weighed in a little bit about this a few minutes ago, but I think when I look at that overall budget for fire, I always think about it in the context of collection of the revenue that we just reorganize, we just send directly to the water utility. Like that's just the way the world is, and we're legislatively required to do that. So fair enough. But what are we getting for our 11 cents? And I think the other thing important on that page is to see how much of the overall revenue is coming from outside of the town. So these are our friends in Mater's Cove and Indian Point, Clearland. And if you add up that number, which is the 222 you see for outside revenue, and you dovetail that with the very substantial donations from revenue from the fire society, and I would say it's about 60/40. It's about, so 60% of the revenue for the fire department comes from town residents. The other 40 is really coming from the regional area, and as well as the donations directly to the fire department. So like we're advocates for the fire department, not only for ourselves, but also for Peters Cove, and not like we're also their representatives when we're talking about the budget. One thing, I guess we've kind of talked about this every year, and I won't. If you look at our decision 2 or 3 years ago to bifurcate the tax rate between fire and town general, we split it up to 121. We split it up, pardon me, to 132. We split it up into the 111 plus 21. And when we did that, we provide more direct visibility on the fire costs. I think that was a wise decision, and I think it's really helped us. And the fire rates have kind of grown over the last few years. The new fire department, pumper, increased training, all of what we do there. When we split that up, we just gave everybody the same allocation. We gave residential and commercial taxpayers the same splits. So if you go back to page 1, is it page 1 or page 2 actually? Page 1 of this. You see the same fire assessment rate, the same rate as 1/3. The 21 cents gets split the same across all the categories. And compare and contrast that to the way the splits happen on the difference between residential and commercial. So we're there. The point is now, over the years, as the residential rates have grown and as the residential assessment has grown, like residential is now paying 90% of the fire rates. And commercial is paying 10% of the fire rates because of a combination of assessment growth coupled with the fact that everybody's paying for the same splits, 21 cents regardless if you're residential or commercial. So where we are now, we're in this really weird situation where the Bank of Montreal is paying half as much as the art gallery next door to it for fire rates. And that, in my mind, is completely illogical. So, and it's because of the nuances, the methodology around how the assessments get created, and the lack of the cap assessment and the commercial assessment. So it's this unusual circumstance where the highest risk buildings in town are actually paying the least amount towards fire. The gas station, reinforced plastics plant, like they're paying the same rate as Mrs. Wynot on Pleasant Street on a per cap basis, and that is it's illogical that that's the and we haven't gotten there. This just didn't just happen. This has happened over a number of years. I'm okay with the 1 cent across the whole basis because I think that we need that to cover. Because as you can see from the budget, we still only have a $25,000 surplus, and every 5 or 6 years somebody comes in and says, "I need like $1 million for a new truck." So like, what's 25,000 plus the modest amount of money that we put into the reserve relative to the capital costs that we all have to pay for when we need a truck or a pumper or something like that? But I do wonder about if there's merit in splitting the fire rate in the same way we split the residential rate, and having separate commercial fire rates that is different than residential rates. And I'm not suggesting we have the same ratio, which would triple. Like, I'm not saying we add 30 cents to the fire rate for commercial, because I think there'd be a lot of pushback against that. But I'm thinking about over the next 10 years, 15 years, giving council some tools to figure out what the fair splits are between who pays what for fire. Because when you just take it down to just an analogy, and I just say, well, I got the Bank of Montreal, and they're paying half as much as the portrait gallery. The buildings that are very similar, it just doesn't make any sense to me that that's the case. And I just wonder what you all think of that.
Do they require extra, other than if it was an actual emergency? I know, like, you're often, used to be anyway, to the old nursing home, like almost every day, the alarm would go off and, they have to, you know, firefighters would have to come and go down and say, oh, it's the alarm again, or, but they still had to call. Do we get a lot of calls from these places other than an
Well,
emergency?
we're fortunate to get very few calls everywhere, which is hopefully we get no calls, so there's no fires. But I'm just talking about when you look at who pays what, and what percentage of the overall was, we need the 800 grand for fire. Get a lot of it from Arizona, Indian Point, no plant, don't have any commercial base. We get a lot of donations in the budget, thank goodness. And then we have a lot of money that only goes in one door or the other door for the hydrants. So what we're left with is we're left with a split between residential and commercial. And if you look at it on a house by house basis, I think the commercial rate is really low for fire services. I've thought that for a long time, but now it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem because of the way that the residential tax base is rolling over so much more. Think about how many residential houses in town sell relative to how many commercial houses sell. It's been a long time since a commercial building sold. I'm sure there's a few, but very unusual when someone sells a commercial building. And that's why when you look at our tax base, like the commercial tax base hasn't grown in 10 years relative to residential.
So what are other communities doing for the fire rates? Like, the
Well-
commercial broken out,
I don't know. I don't know what other towns do.
that'd be interesting to check. Councilor Bloom?
So just to clarify, are you saying that the Bank of Montreal pays less partly because they're on the grandfather system?
No, they pay less because their assessment's so low, because they're on the commercial assessment. There's a reason why the commercial assessment's triple the residential assessment.
Okay.
It's because their methodology to calculate their assessment is different between residential and commercial. So what we have on fire, and it all comes out in the wash because other than fire, it's because of the way it's a self-inflicted pain. Like, this is a problem. Don't get me wrong; it's as much of my fault as anyone else. We just didn't think about it. It slipped by. When we originally did the split, we should have split it differently. We should have made it like 21 cents residential. Should have been like, we're 18 cents residential, 30 cents commercial at the time. But if you looked at the breakout, so
So prior to breaking it out, obviously as a charter general, it was being charged.
right.
The council was,
Yeah, I mean, that's the important point, is this went off the rails when we split it up.
Yeah.
Because it came 300 at large.
Yeah.
And it was taken care of.
Yeah.
And I agree with your premise. I'm just wondering how you do it without the pitchforks coming out.
Yeah.
Uh,
The pitchforks are already out.
Well,
Well, I mean, the way you do it is to some extent offer a reduction in the corresponding commercial general.
or you don't.
Or you don't, but then,
I mean,
in terms of moderating
I mean-
the impact.
I mean, we have a brand new commercial tax base is contributing less to our overall revenues than at any time in the last 6 months. You know, when it was only 15 years ago that commercial was paying 40% of the price, they're down under 23%. Now that's a function of assessments. So all I'm suggesting is that we don't have to solve this problem or do anything outlandish. I think that the direction would be for this particular year, when we show the illustration that we have a different setup, right? We just start slowly and we say we think over time that the commercial tax base should be contributing more to fire. And we don't need to solve it all in 1 year. I'm just saying what we should. You start with.
Councilor,
And I think a good way to start that would be in our budget to show the fire as residential, commercial, et cetera, even though the rates are the same.
Yeah,
And then
Yeah.
next year, you could say, well, let's use commercial by penny or whatever.
Feel like doing that?
Well, so we do show on the rate sheet, we break it out,
Okay,
and then
okay.
on the revenue schedule, I do
Yeah,
break
it
it
does
out
break
as
it
well.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
It just highlights what Joe said, that the
Yeah,
benefit
that-
is 10% instead of.
I'm looking at it.
so,
Exceeding 89.7%
for-
for residential and.
so for this year, we've given everybody a stipend, right? And we're carrying that message to our friends on the 23rd with Maynard Stove. So this isn't, this,
Today, but.
yeah, but, so, I mean, it's not just us, because we're also, we need to be fair to our friends and neighbors in these other regional areas that also pay 40% of the tab. So all of the increase that we see in the budgets required, we're also hoping and, counting on our friends and neighbors to also do that as well. So like, it's not a hill to die on for me right now that this particular budget is getting the 1 cent. But I just think that this trend is going to continue because the assessment growth that the town's going to enjoy is going to continue to go higher and higher and higher on the residential. It's going to flat for a long time on commercial. And you just think about our land use bylaws. How many more commercial buildings are we going to build in all of that? Very few. So, if we're at a point where we have residential properties in town paying more for fire than reinforced plastics, that's a problem. That's illogical because we've spent a lot of money. That's just an analogy. They're a major employer and a huge contributor and a generous benefactor to the community. I'm just trying to show the math behind the splits doesn't seem to be holding up. And I wonder, this trend is going to continue. And then it'll be like, oh, it's 5% of the budget versus 10% of the budget. So you can't have on the other hand, 10 years ago, if someone would have told me we were going to have an aerial truck, I would have laughed and said, no chance. But you start building 4-story condos in town, you need an aerial truck. These are things that we never thought we needed 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Now we have to have them because we've got church steeples, multi-story buildings, developments, condos. You need modern equipment and you pay for those things. So the idea of we're just going to wait for the aerial truck to come from Bloomberg, no, the insurance industry requires better solutions. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
I think I see what you're talking about. Commercial. What I'm wondering is to include in that line the actual rate of 21 cents. And just so people know what.
It's on the first page 1.
Yeah, but I get what Kelly's saying on the budget. Because
budget.
it would jump off the page a little clearer to say, oh yeah, 80-20.
Outside area revenue, 11 cents or whatever.
Yeah.
it is. Just
Yeah.
so
Well, I
Do
think
you want me to put it just in the description, like residential assessment?
just put that.
Easy peasy.
so anyway, annual rent of differentiated fire rates, but I do think it's important for us to at least acknowledge facts because we end up in these conversations about, well, the commercial tax base are so important to the community, but like think about the amount of money we're spending. Commercial is 23% of the revenue. They're only 10% of fire. And don't get me wrong, thank you very much for all the revenue contributing all the fire regions to the town. But you're getting a pretty great deal because it's $3.08 plus 21. It's $3.95 in Bridgewater. Right? So don't compare me to the Almighty, just compare me to the alternative. It's much higher tax rates in Lunenburg. And we absorb. Now we're talking about absorbing the VIC. Last year we decided we were going to absorb the baskets. We're absorbing $100,000 for the comfort stations, the washrooms. We've got $20,000 worth of funding for festivals. I just think it's not, and I think we should do all of that. But sometimes you just say thanks.
We're going to have, Councilor Carroll, you have a question, and then we're gonna take a short recess to stretch our legs.
Well, I agree that we've got to find a way to adjust those inequities, but it seems to me it's built in with that assessment cap. And that's really the limit for commercial. It is,
Well,
we can't do anything about that. Anyway,
no, I mean,
yeah, so bringing that commercial fire rate in.
it's about,
Gradually
it's
back.
about value.
No, we're gonna take a recess.
We continue this discussion though
Yes,
after the
we
recess.
can continue it, but we'll take a little recess
Remember
because
my
we've been
question.
sitting here
Should we do it?
over 2 hours.
Right, check
So
the cigarette?
turn off your camera and make sure you. Yeah.
As far as I know, we have resumed audio on the tube. I'll double check over here.
And everybody's on, everybody's,
If your camera was down, you can put it back.
okay.
Penny saving the day.
Hi, we're back. Deputy, you need to put your camera back on.
I can't, my camera is permanently broken from an IT. That's why I'm Counselor Barrett.
He's here. You need to. On Tuesday.
Yeah.
Sure, make an appointment. Okay, so we are resuming. We're gonna take a question from Counselor Carver, and then I'm going to hand it over to the CAO. Who's gonna brief us on some of the capital budget items, and then we'll be going into closed session. We'll give it over to Counselor Carver.
Yes, thank you. So I've had this question for many years. It's about how commercial properties are assessed. Because when Deputy Mayor Feeney was speaking earlier, it sounded as if he was referring to property assessment. And my simple brain translated that as assessment on the value of the property.
No.
But so I asked the Deputy Mayor Feeney during the break, because of his long involvement with PVSC, about how commercial properties are assessed. Because I thought that they were assessed on their income. And in fact, he confirmed that that is true. So when we refer to assessments of commercial assessments, it's based on their income, not the actual increase in property. So it's the real estate. So the cap doesn't actually come into play for the commercial properties.
No, it doesn't.
Oh. Okay,
That's what I learned during the break.
that's interesting. Okay, I
I
hope
hope
many of
that's
you at home and in our gallery have learned that too. Okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna give it over to the CAO and this little fancy sheet. Is what we're gonna do.
Thank you, Mayor. And so, yeah, we're just going to take a moment to introduce the summary of new current year capital budget. So, Councilor Carver had asked, the items that we really could as a council would be supported this year moving off. Those items, how could we kind of zero in on those amongst all of the other ongoing things, returning things, projects that are partway through, these multi-year plans. So most of those do not really change in this annual budget process, but there are a whole bunch that are. So what I think is isolated current year projects, just the current year budget costs, and if there's any anticipated external. I realize I accidentally knocked off the column that showed the source of funds, so that I probably should add back in, but ultimately what you can do is flip down this list and get a quick read of the items that are pretty discretionary to be potentially moved off in future years or amended. So this might help focus discussion on the capital side of things for next Friday's meeting. I don't want to take it now. And in doing that, I thought it was a good opportunity since I didn't have a general update to the budget for this week, and we are doing updates next week. I'm not going to do an update to the full capital budget because I haven't received any feedback on it, so there's nothing for me to change at this point. I can highlight some changes coming from the staff level based on information that we've become aware of since last week. So the first of those is page 2, highlighted soundproofing from 77,000 to 13,000. It's still pretty expensive, but I told you Jonathan promised a second quote for a better price. 13,000 certainly seems more reasonable. So that is a number that we could actually for 15.
How do they do that? Like, are they gonna insulate the wall or like what?
Yeah,
what will that
so in
require?
both cases, it was involving taking these walls and your office walls, taking the drywall down and putting up cladding and putting drywall like it's a whole tree walling. But these guys were able to do that for your office. The doors require certain amendment. That's the 2,000. From 77,000 to 15, they're both talking about replacing wall cladding with soundproof wall cladding and fixing up the doors so that they're also going to be sound resistant. So there's, I think, some meaningful room that you get in 13, which is actually 15,000. A little better than 77. It may or may not be considered worthy based on all the other considerations of this year, but I just wanted to let you know, Jonathan did come through with a better price for the installer.
Okay.
And then down that page, we also have ball field treatment. And so Jonathan is pointing out, people are asking once again, is the ball field open? I will say as of today, the answer is definitely no. It is in, once again, very poor condition, ensuring sporting activities. It can be used at your own risk.
And
dogs, everything else,
That's
but
because of the
for some
damage
dogs,
from the grubs. Yeah,
last
it's
year,
not vandalism
No.
or wear and tear of use or not updating equipment and the infrastructure. It's the raccoons and crows that are getting there every day and digging up the lawn and the grass and everything.
So
Yes,
where does that leave our consideration of the grant to the T-ball?
we had the same issue last year. So at this point, we last year gave them the grant and we said, look, you can find another field or our field might. But we're not fixing it right now and it's closed. Here's a grant conditional offering from you. And they were able to figure out between our field, which did actually get a bit better through the season, and we were able to open it later in the season at a much expense. And the school have to run the program. But yeah, that would be, I guess, my assessment of what they would need to do. We say the same this year. And I would not recommend that we spend $28,000 on this year. Neither would Jonathan. But we do need to be honest. If we're not prepared to spend it and have Jonathan out there next week with the crew, we should be telling people and will be telling people as next week that the facility is not open for sporting activity at this point.
So
Play by ear.
is there a long-term, is there something we can do about that? I mean, almost every yard in West Main Street is dug up.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had the sods torn right off our terraces by
We're
raccoons.
just talking about the United about what they've been doing, because they've been taking the approach of this, we can't tolerate the field being just not allowed. So we're going to proactively update all kinds of contractors do something about it. It seems to be having some success, but it has been costly.
Councillor Buckman.
Well, I've heard it said, and this is a longer-term project altogether, that Malmby United wanted practice fields, which would be artificial turf. And very good stuff out there, apparently. Certainly not for this year, that's for sure, but that might be an approach that would be in multiples of 28,000, I suppose, by the time it's done. But nevertheless, it's a way around this particular problem.
Still go under the artificial, and smother them.
It's not,
Yeah, I think you're right. Probably be a treatment. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at this. I think it's part of the Jubilee Park consideration. Is there anyone around the table who is going to be advocating that we spend $28,000? Because otherwise, I would be better off taking it now. So what to expect.
It did improve last year after,
Yeah, we did actually
It did
decide
heal
we could open
itself.
it. It suffered.
It did heal itself and people did go back to using it, but as far as booking teams to play right now, it is a big deal, I know, for people.
I just wanted to ask who is using it.
Well, last year almost no one.
No, but historically.
Historically, there were 5 leagues locally, mostly not all residents of the town, but there was a good amount, like almost every night league play was happening as years ago, like not none of our long past. Would it come back if the fields were reliably available? It's hard to say, but Jonathan points out other issues now because we haven't been doing other things. Like the bleachers were scheduled for replacement, but we didn't replace them because of all these other considerations. So we would need, if we really wanted to bring them back, the question, of course, would be: is the current configuration as a baseball field the thing we'd want to double down on with that? Yeah.
So my brain is going a bit sideways to other uses of that land, which, for example, housing or the revisioning
It's
of
recreational.
Jubilee Park too.
Only recreation.
Well, certainly the concept design for the pool has the pool switched on the
Yeah.
footprint so that the ball field would be the pool. The pool would be where the ball field. in that sense. So there's a lot of conceptual changes.
Right. So I saw around the table head shaking when I mentioned housing. Why is that?
Because the Women's Institute left it only for recreational purposes.
It's just zoning, right?
Well, I mean, this is our commons essentially, the land that the town agreed to use for
Right.
community purposes. The commons in Halifax has had arguments made over the years that public housing, for example, is a community purpose, but it certainly doesn't jive with the intent of the
Made under the set.
which I don't think it was good.
It's a
I
philosophical.
do hold the minute.
But it's
Yeah,
fair, it's fair to say that through a number of decisions over a number of years, we've decided to prioritize and allocate our financial resources. Home-based center, Jason Field. So splitting the dollars doesn't seem that wise. And I guess we've come as a council, we've came to that same conclusion a number of years in a row. I mean, albeit at the detriment of that particular field, but this doesn't strike me as a good way to spend our money. We should just let it.
If there's a coherent plan, I think we'll have within the next year. I think this year just doesn't.
So-
make sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say that that's sort of part and parcel of PhD is looking at is
Yeah.
kind of an overview of the whole thing, what is that rather than what we have and we keep.
And I just wonder about whether that will ever be a field, sports field in the way it was traditionally used. And whether that's really the conversation the council should have about beyond the financial, it's really about,
But the PAC will be going
Yeah.
into that,
yeah.
doing a deep, to
So,
the
yeah,
community.
I think, you know, that's all the rationale why we would not be proceeding with anything. So I won't get emotional. I just want to tell Jonathan. And next week, I think I know where we're going. Then on the next page, I present that as a bit of a choice that we needed to make. The voltage regulator could buy time for the installation of fourth circuit. But I also wanted to note that we did get confirmation at the Maritime Municipal Utilities Alliance meeting this week that there will be another utility support distribution upgrades funding stream at 50% next fall. And the MMUA is working very hard to ensure that our small units will get good consideration in this round after only St. John Energy was successful in the last round of all of the local utilities in the elected provinces. And St. John Energy, obviously, as chair of the MMUA, is saying, well, look, these other guys deserve funding at least as much as we do. And how do we get there? So MMUA has obtained a COA funding, which is in part supporting this larger effort to rationalize the NRCan funding for capital improvement. All that being said, this was something we hoped we could increase the dollars for. I would strongly suggest that the fourth circuit wait, and that we likely have potential to get 50% dollars on. I would combine it with the initiatives we have down for the next several years, which don't appear on this little sheet because this is always future years, and put something together for council's consideration. But it's good news. And I talked to Phil about whether even the voltage regulator purchase would need to happen early in the fiscal year because we're trying to line up their arrival for when they need to be installed next year. And he's saying maybe we even can to find out, depending on how long it takes to find out about the NRCan money, maybe we can even wait to order the voltage regulator. So just a bit of good news I wanted to share.
And where do they come from? Are they terrified of?
Well, yeah, they're definitely coming from outside of Canada. As to where, I mean, probably China.
Yeah, okay.
So, under transportation, number 5, on the first page, how many times have we bumped that one forward?
Orchard Parish.
Yeah.
At least twice. I think there's a strong rationale that with Edgewater wrapping up, we could finish that part of town, do the things that are needed, and be done with it. But,
Is it a nice to do or must do?
I mean, there's 2 streets in town that we would say are the most in need, biggest streets areas. It's that one and the Faubourg Road area, which could be construed to include Main Street towards Lunenburg, but that is also available for future provincial funding, so we might not.
Fobo's eligible for.
No, Fobo isn't Main Street, so I'm saying Fobo and this one are the 2 worst that we are prioritize.
So which part of this one, where you're pointing? With the
The
dormitories?
whole,
The whole thing,
description.
the whole
It also makes
thing.
sense to come in and pick.
The whole thing at 255,000.
Yeah. I mean, the parking lot is the option, because if you're not doing any of the other parking lots in Edgewater, right? Anyway, it certainly needs paving.
And the parish street parking lot is behind the church?
Yeah, so that's what I was just saying, if we didn't do any of the other waterfront parking, we lease it from the church, but we're responsible for pavement.
Behind the church?
Yeah.
We lease
No, yeah,
Yeah,
where the
yeah.
parish hall is.
Yeah, yeah.
That's public parking now, it's outside. the
Oh, I
public
didn't
parking.
know that.
I think most of the vehicles we'll see there are not.
That's the
church
big, that's the big P parking.
It seems well used, so I think the question was, the parking lot could be left off, but it's such an opportunity to do it at the same time, it's gonna be more cost effective to do it at the same time. If we're not doing any other waterfront parking lots, maybe it makes sense to cut the parking lot just to save $50,000.
So, Dylan, I'm thinking about the conversation we had last week around the Lutheran church parking lot and the fact that probably there could be some paving there. We talked about it at the last meeting, it was 60,000, somewhere around that range. Then we still have an unknown. I must say I'm thinking a lot about that United Church parking lot and that entrance and where the paving starts and stops on the old Edgewater Road up the hill, and how that's all gonna look, and wonder about spending $100,000 on Parish Street parking lot across from the two Mortons, right? That's what we're talking about, versus prioritizing making sure that the Edgewater project has, like, does anybody want to see a paver out there a year from now? We kind of want to do all Edgewater and not pave again for 10 years, don't we? That's, I think, our aspiration. So I think in the hierarchy of needs, I would have preferred to hear a little more about how we're going to talk about those two other part elements. And now I'm not even talking about down closer to Kenny's Landing. I'm assuming we're just going to leave that in the capable hands of the homeowner, of the property owner. But I worry about having a dirt pile, mud puddle at the bottom of the hill, and then run into beautiful paving and anyway, preaching to the converted here. But what are your thoughts, everybody around the table?
Brian?
Well, my thoughts is that we talked at the last meeting about colorization of the trail, which in my mind is far more important than parking lots. So I wouldn't want to lose the potential for that. Should come across as we can no longer afford it because we're doing parking lots or whatever it is. So it's a matter of where do you prioritize?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just want to say, it's great to have the discussion, obviously, but I had only intended to say what I've said and introduce this document, pick this discussion up next time.
Yeah.
If you do want to get to the closed session in the interest of time.
Oh, okay. Well, I think this was a good introduction to that.
So this sheet is only this year.
Oh.
I recommended for next year.
Oh, for next year, okay.
Yeah. It's just a lot more money.
And but before we go, number 3, the Main Street handrail, what does that refer to?
I think I actually told Jeff John that I don't think it's the first year, he did that last year. So this is a
It's
different.
like knee high. It can't be called.
What the heck, where?
So there's a rail that is across her house.
Brings it
But
all
that was
tight.
done last year, so I think this is a different one. I will double check where this
Yeah.
is. what is
Okay.
the reference here.
It's
I thought it was the bridge replacement being double counted, but he said it was a different.
not so much a handrail as something to protect people from falling into the ditch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in that
not very-
location, I'll ask Jonathan,
Yeah.
where is this?
Okay.
It looked very high when I was a child. And I thinking it's not made it because it's not piping like it's. Anyway. It's all piped together,
Yeah, we probably.
yeah.
So we don't have the funding sources here.
Yeah, so that was an accidental, I should have called this missing, so you can cross-reference to your bigger budget document. to
But
see
it's,
the
I take it it's big. And this includes the attachment for the street funding. Is that
Yeah,
incremental or is that inside the existing budget if it's on this list?
All this is in the budget.
In the budget,
yeah,
okay, fair
yeah.
enough. I think that's.
Yeah, so as you read
Good
through, like,
project.
if any of these projects that are in this short list were moved off to a year or just canceled, what you would be doing is you'd be reducing the impact on reserves or borrowing that is baked into the operating budget. So we sort of reflect that.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about this next.
We're talking about this. This will be the main discussion for next week, I think.
We're going to close.
So, our agenda, okay, so I would like someone to make a motion to go into closed session for MG 22(2)C personnel matters and 3.2 MG 22(2)E contract negotiation.
Yeah.
Who would like to move that? So Councilor Carver, thank you. Councilor Boone. Okay. Thank you. Favor, by aye. Aye. The motion is carried. We go into closed session. Thank
We're
you.
online.
It's at 6 we're watching now. I haven't finished it yet.
And one in the gallery.
1 second.
One in the gallery. Oh, yes, goodbye.